Hi there, everybody. Just making a new video because I haven't in a long time, and I wanted to respond to the Brian Harvey interview. No, it wasn't really. It was kind of like a blog he was doing, a vlog, which I'm doing now, and I've never done before because I've always had a radio show. He said that I speak to Palladians. No, that's complete BS. I don't make videos about people and I don't speak to Palladians. So there we are. I was the one that broke the story about the red rooms, and ironically my producer put a Tommy Robinson picture of him at the front of it, and from then on in, Free Tommy Robinson picked up the video, and then from then on in lots of people saw it, and then Red Pill Phil did a interview with Brian. So actually, Brian, it would have been better if you'd have said thank you so much, Christine, and thank you so much for your producer for putting me out there and getting my story told. And then second in line, Red Pill Phil would have come in. But no, instead of that, Brian, even though I thought we were friends and we chatted for hour upon hour upon hour, and I even woke up sometimes when I was due to do the school run next day, I woke up and I would listen to you for hour upon hour and counsel you and try and make sure you were okay. And then all I got from you was to turn on the thing and you saying, thank you, Red Pill Phil. No, actually it was me. Okay. And it wasn't me. It was my producer who put Tommy Robinson on the cover, and then it was picked up by Free Tommy Robinson. So actually thanks to them, and I don't think any of them got a mention either. And then you said you didn't want to be involved with me because I speak to Palladians. No, actually, I don't speak to Palladians. I don't even believe in the existence of Palladians, so why would I speak to them? Nope, all wrong. Right, now what I'm going to do is read out my blog, since everything seems to have got a little bit confused about who I am in this scenario. I'm not sure whether anybody gives a damn, but there's an off button there which you can press if you're not interested. If you are interested, I'm going to read out my blog, and this is my story. Currently, at the moment in the High Courts of Justice, there's a court case going on, and the court case is Sir Elton John versus me, basically. There are a few people standing in between of that, like a newspaper, but they are fighting me and they are trying to say that I did things that I didn't actually do. Since I'm standing between them and millions, and they have already burgled me, my life is actually in danger. It's not that I've been saying it on YouTube all the time, so the police come round and they're like, oh, everyone's saying your life's in danger, are you okay? No, my life actually is in danger because I am a threat to people. Right, here's my blog, Creatures of the Light, so nobody thinks that I chat to Palladians. It's called, I've said that, it's called Creatures of the Light. Time is all we really have of true value. That is why the rich and powerful use us little people to do the meaningless, repetitive tasks until all our precious time has been wasted on parasites who somehow hold all the power. From the get-go, my time was stolen by them. Time is the lifeblood of our lives. Kate Spade, Robin Williams have all been murdered by them to stop these people from revealing their evil deeds. I had my own life ruined by mainstream media when they called me the devil's daughter. Odd then that I joined the very people who had destroyed me, mainstream media. I wondered about this until I found out the truth about my life by an American called Anna. More about that later. It's August 2018 and ongoing in the High Courts of Justice, London. Hollywood's favourite London barrister, David Sherborne, is demanding millions from my old employer, The Sun, at my expense, for payouts to Sir Elton John, Hugh Grant and 99 others, including Heather Mills, Lily Allen and Liz Hurley, whom he feels I've spied on for over 2 decades whilst working as an investigative journalist for the News of the World, The Sun and the Daily Mail. Sherborne has called me a spy and a data thief, but the reality is I've never been arrested or even questioned for what the Hollywood elite state as fact about me through David Sherborne, Hugh Grant's barrister. When I rang his offices, he told me through his assistant, Andrew, it's nothing personal. Sadly, David, I support myself and my child without any assistance, so I cannot afford for you to shout out in public that I am a thief, just so you and your chums can get a payoff. They feed off us, you see, we creatures of the light, and they are vampiric, unable to create or to really love. The fact is, I was a star witness for Operation Wheating against the criminality of phone hacking at News International. One of his claims is that while working on Fleet Street as an investigative journalist and close confidant of Rebecca Brooks, I pretended to be a psychiatrist and pretext calls to the Priory to find out all the intimate secrets of the rich and famous. The director of the Priory, Dr. Mark Collins, also my hypnotherapist for many years, tells me no such calls were made, and if they ever were, our strict security is that such pretend doctors, if they ever existed, would always be made to put any request for information in writing. Yup, the Hollywood elite are lying. But this is not about money. This is about the work I've been doing on my radio show. Now it's ceased. Wonder upon wonders. Exposing pedophiles in Hollywood and the murder of celebrities, set to reveal child sex trafficking and all the other dirt they get up to in their secret rituals in the dark. The reality is that victimhood is something they know very little about. The current status of this world is that it is owned by these vampiric controllers who feed off the rest of us because we are of the light. They are moths to our flames that they seek to devour. My life has been that of a squished, sucked-on piece of light. The press didn't just leak a few bits of lines about me. They labelled me the devil's daughter when I was 23 years of age, all over the TV and the front pages of a national newspaper. I'm going to pose the theory that there is an us and a them sharing this planet, and sometimes people's lives can be affected negatively from the get-go by the vampires ruling this planet. I'd like to share my own experience. I was dumped at the gates of the Roman Catholic Church, left to fend for myself as a blonde, blue-eyed girl. I was sexually abused. This is in my book, Searching for Daddy. I suffered lifelong PTSD from the large amounts of sexual abuse I tolerated. I was a good investigative journalist exposing priests in the Catholic Church and other paedophiles. I fought against bullying on GMTV, fighting for the working classes over school bullying being ignored in schools to the detriment of the children. I was to be escorted to the courthouse by Operation Wheating and Detective Michael White, who was my minder, to stand up to my old employer, News International, after the criminality of the phone hacking. I was a star witness against the editor, News of the World phone hacker Greg Miskew. Greg, after coming out of prison for phone hacking, went on to the hacked off payroll. The fact is, Hugh Grant's hacked off are a highly ruthless, organised mafia who don't care about employing Greg Miskew or Glenn Mulcair after they come out of prison. They aren't against hacking, they just want to own the hackers for themselves. The truth is that Hollywood are committed to ending free speech and use the ruse of pampered celebrities wanting their privacy to push this sinister agenda of ending any kind of investigations in the media. They have control of Facebook, of YouTube, so it isn't an option to use this as an avenue either. Try to criticise these elite and see how your channel is removed in seconds. This will get worse if Hacked Off have their way. Hollywood Mafia are not on side with us. I've been revealing the hundreds of murders of children and activities of elite pedophiles in nightclubs over many years and other celebrity high places to the public, and sometimes stuff that wasn't published. I have long fought a corrupt media. I came forward to Levinson while I was helping Nick Davis research his book, Hack Attack, and yet no one was interested in how Fleet Street used serving SAS, and nobody asked me, and the fact they had asked me to spy on people at the Priory when I was a patient there getting hypnotherapy. It was only after Hugh Grant read my memoir did he approach me, and then he paid for me to go and live in an isolated river house in Windsor. This is through Mr. Graham Johnson of Hacked Off. Yes, it was finery. Yes, it had a boat. But while I was living there all alone with my little boy, we were subjected to a midnight raid and a burglary. While my son was recovering, I was threatened by Hacked Off frontman Graham Johnson that he would come and kick my door down if I didn't meet him with some Daily Mail remittances so he could finish Paul Dacre. That's a quote. Luckily, someone rather important was in the car to witness this, and it was duly reported to the CID, who were investigating my break-in, who were well aware of what was happening. They were very eager to get paperwork I had in my possession because to them, they felt it stood for millions for these celebrities. They offered me £25,000 to hand over these remittance advices from the Daily Mail. I refused, so they broke in and took them. A TV company has tape recording and all emails, so even if I'm bumped off, they will reveal that the CID said indeed it was a professional burglary. The TV company also has the documents where they offered me $25,000. In The Guardian, Nick Davis' book, I helped him and he called me York and listed me in the back as one of the investigators who carried out HUMINT. HUMINT is human intelligence. Yet Hacked Off tell me I have to prove my innocence rather than they have to prove that I am a hacker. The banal truth is I can barely turn on a computer, let alone use a laptop to hack other people, nor am I a data thief, having been a PI since age 16 and know that data theft is illegal. There is an us and a them. One feeds off the other. I will call the feeders vampires because they have a hive mind and they have no God. The bottom line is they are evil, devoted to money, embarrassingly enamoured by celebrity, and devoted to lifestyle and materialism. They don't care about love or God. For those who wish to hear more, this is my life story. My life began at the Crusades of Rescue Kids Home in London. The other kids became my close family. A student came to study the emotionally deprived kids at my kids' home who turned out to be militarily connected through his father. When I turned 16, I felt as if my feelings were dead. I felt trapped inside a prison of ice where others couldn't reach me. Yet I was an open house with no boundaries and anybody could use me. I had PTSD. When he went back abroad at 18, I went to live in a homeless hostel. I had no idea how to support myself. I had no education. I was scared of ending up a prostitute like some of the other girls in care, like Kerry who had slashed her wrists. And so I vowed I'd do anything by ending up like Kerry. Some part of me feared I'd end up a whore or suiciding. Nobody cared about me and I didn't know love. When you live a life where no one cares and no one ever cared, you often think of leaving this world via suicide. I tried to kill myself over 10 times. I've had 3 serious stomach pumps from my time in care, and after, where the boys were raped by the social workers and wrist slitting went on so much, the beige carpet in the corridor was stained red. I joined men who were ex-MI5, ex-military, and a firm who needed young girls to do surveillance and office work. It was just easy work for nobodies. I became a private detective, but really I was a schmuck, used for getting close to men. It was dangerous, and it got me down. Nothing glamorous about it, nothing special about it. There are so many of these agencies through London, throughout the UK and America. In the small, close-knit world of ex-spooks, I was in awe of an ex-public school boy called John Boyle. He looked like Dirk Bogarde, his air of mystery and unreachability. I'd heard a lot of things about him. None of these things matched with the John Boyle I knew, who looked so alike to delicate and genteel Bogarde. The agency taught me how to trace missing people and use a car to tail a mark. At the home, they discovered I had a bit of what the Irish call second sight. I knew things others didn't, an empathic feeling for what other people felt. It made me a very talented detective. I was pleased that I was actually talented at something. Mostly, I found answers, how to solve problems through sleeping on the problem. Then I'd wake with the knowledge. I assumed I had a deeper self who was cleverer than I was, because the outer me was a bit of an idiot. Maybe I was a bit of a autistic type of a kid. I know I made bad eye contact. I was impractical and easily led. My life was empty because my relationships often failed. I'd give too much, then feel bad, and confuse others by being cross. I was oversensitive to rejection. I stomached loneliness and grew used to it. The vile job fitted a loner always undercover using another name, Janie or Rachel or Mary. I didn't feel it was fair the way adopted kids were labelled. My adopted mother said it's because we were born out of wedlock. The family was strict Irish Catholics and my dad's sister was a nun. I found a book in my adopted mother's drawer. The book was all about the Moors murderer, serial killer Ian Brady, and I felt intrigued why an adopted young man of 25 would rape and murder. I don't know why I wrote to him. I knew if I did try to hurt my abusive father, he would lose no sleep in beating me up. Maybe Brady was my cage punchback, or maybe I wanted to prove that adopted kids weren't really evil, that something had happened to make them like they were. Was I angry? Yeah, I seethed with hatred towards a world that had left me out of it. My parents were outwardly respectable and loved by everybody. They even boasted how much God loved them. So I felt on my own. I didn't even have a God. I scrutinised Brady's crimes. Like me, he had an adoption that failed, and he was in pain over being called a bastard. I began to think that unlike my sexually abusive father, Brady was somehow innocent. I don't know why. Something in his eyes, in the photograph. A cop investigating the case asked around about black magic, and others sneered at him for it. I wondered if something dark and hidden had gone on. I sensed it somehow. My adoptive aunt, the nun, Sister Kathleen Hart of the Daughters of St. Paul, taught me how to follow the waxing and waning of the moon. I studied theosophy, and I found out I was powerfully gifted with prophecy. In another time, Sister Kathleen Hart of the Daughters of St. Paul would have been burned at the stake. Desperate for answers to the meaning of life, I wrote and visited serial murderer Ian Brady when I was just 21 to try and find out why children like us were evil. They weren't, of course. I'd just been told that by my adoptive mother, who beat me bloody. On the third visit to the Liverpool-based hospital, Brady was full of drugs and he sat alone with me. The psychiatrist had deemed all his social visits be unsupervised. I was a really stupid girl, out of my depth. Hawk-eyed Brady lunged at me, his recent medication giving him the courage to flick his tongue greedily around my little mouth. Staggering out of there in agony, my mouth covered in his filthy gob, I felt like my little body held all the energy of his heinous crimes. I felt like his crimes, like demons, sat inside, like dirty spit inside my gut. I wanted to die. I felt invaded by something. I saw visions of bloody, violent, terrifying crimes, and I knew something had entered inside me. I prayed and prayed to get it out of me, whatever it was. It felt like it was alive. I read about walk-ins and I wondered, was I one? I felt stronger and after reading a book called Ruth Montgomery's Strangers Among Us. I prayed that I'd be freed and let a higher being take over my body. I wanted out. I wanted to die. Things began to get better, and I don't know why. I almost felt like I was a different person to the one I had been up to that time. I noted on the visits each personality of Ian Brady was different. One was intellectual, one a child, one a teenager. His fourth personality felt pure evil. I called the fourth man, the torturer I found inside him, Nazi Doctor. I felt his dark, powerful energy as being something entirely different from Brady, who was weak, effeminate, little muppet, full of ego and a vile pseudo-intellectualism, only fooling other people like Alan Kiley, who looked up to the weak child killer. But it didn't fool me. I also decided that enough was enough. Investigating why Ian Brady killed was beyond me, so I put it all behind me. Unknown to me, lurking in the background, a Fleet Street journalist of some fame called Philip Hall hung around outside my digs in London, watching me like a detective. I blushed as this classy, handsome stranger charmed me with his education and good manners. Phil promised as a big-shot journalist that he could put my name in lights and make me famous by calling me the new Marilyn Monroe. Seemed to me you lived your life like a candle in the wind, never knowing who to ring to when the rain came in. Would have liked to know you, but I was just a kid. Your candle burned out long before your legend ever did. I think every young blonde fancied themselves some Marilyn Monroe, and I was no exception. Phil Hall, who was a senior crime reporter for the Sunday People, told me that he was captivated by the fact that a young beauty had visited such a beast. Phil was a well-known hack and had early grey hair and was softly spoken. I immediately felt attracted to him because he felt like a father figure. I couldn't act, I wasn't even an actress, yet I believed he would make me into Marilyn Monroe. I fantasised about everyone finding me worthwhile and loving me. We sat over a pint of lager in a nearby pub. I told him I'm an orphan. I haven't got a dad. Phil had been served up the details by a man called Alan Graham and Rachel, two scuzzy private eyes who had sold me to him for a deal with Philip's newspaper, the Sunday People, to do illegal data gathering. Dipshit private investigations work for stupid people. They had also gained a £5,000 for selling me. Phil said it meant there was nothing left to pay me for my story, so I'd just have to tell him my story for free. He paused. Didn't you think Ian Brady was your father? That's what Alan told us. I told him, yeah, they said my father was a criminal. Turned out he wasn't a criminal. My so-called real mother has said that he was a criminal because he was a lot older than her and she was 13. But back then, that was enough for him. A criminal's a criminal. Why not a serial killer? The Devil's Daughter was what they called me. They broadcasted my image across the front page of the national newspapers. The Sunday People, under the sad headline of the working class girl with her hair tongued, a golden dress and a bright red glossy lip, far too much eye makeup and dropped pearl earrings. I felt so sad and so ashamed of myself. Ian Brady's daughter. Yet I was no such thing. Phil had no feeling for ruining my life. He told me how beautiful he thought I was, how much like Marilyn Monroe my life had been, how everyone would see me like Marilyn and love me. But I was to be smeared as the daughter of a piece of shit. I was to be vilified, not loved. He was lying. Smile for the camera, it's not the end of the world, the Sunday People photographer told me. But I feared that all around me flames were rising and I was going to be called Satan's daughter. The national press put me on TV advertising their newspaper about my visits to the grimy cell of Moore's murderer Ian Brady. They wrote that I claimed to be his long-lost daughter. Phil said it was better that he phrased it that I'd claimed it. Then he wouldn't get his career ruined when they actually found out it wasn't true. He was over the moon when Ian Brady wrote a letter to him to say he remembered my mother Mary. He was lying, he just wanted to see me again. They dressed me in dark makeup, spiky high heels and the golden red dress I'd been wearing to fly up to Liverpool to go inside and ask the child killer Ian Brady, "Are you my dad?" I was on the pervert serial killer's visiting list, so I had access to go in on any visiting day I wanted. Of course I didn't ask him. I knew he'd lied. I sat opposite vile Ian Brady and wished the floor would open up and swallow me. The press were outside. A serial killer was in front of me. I had no choice. What way to turn? I felt like crying. I was in such a bad position. I dropped my cigarette on the floor and stressed out I swore, "Shit!" Brady nodded over at the guard, who this time sat at the far side of the room, and said, "Yeah, exactly. He is shit." So I told him what mess I was in. "Tell the press nothing," he ordered me dominatingly as Phil Hall waited outside in a car with a photographer. Phil wrote up the tale of a bad blood and orphanages and a monster cuddling a busty blonde, and he made me walk up and down outside the criminally insane asylum, up and down, until he got a good shot of me. When he finally did get the picture, he said, "Look at your eyes. They look so moody and stormy in it." I was just angry and tired and scared. I felt hunted. I read about it all on the front pages of the Sunday tabloid and felt that my life was over. Phil said to me, "It's odd how we have the power to ruin lives. It never ceases to surprise me. People always think you're his daughter now." While the second week's story was being prepared, Phil took us both on a ferry, headed for France. Then he hired a car. It was a soft top. We both drove across France, his white shirt billowing out the window. I kept looking at him. Looking back, I can see he was seducing me, the older man and the young idiot. Maxime de Winter and I was Joan Fontaine. But I was falling for him. The smell of him, who he was, so powerful. He'd just ruined my life, and yet there he was, not caring. Somehow I found it attractive. Phil drove for miles in the dusty heat of France. He drove us south until we reached picturesque Pont du Gard in the south of France. It's to hide you from the pack. The pack was the name they gave to the pack of hounds known as reporters on Fleet Street. Unpacked in our lovely rooms, we met outside and we skinny dipped in the warm French Riviera underneath a magnificent stone bridge that looked almost Greek. It reflected into the water. It was such a beautiful place. Pont du Gard. It was like paradise. I was so glad to be away from the newspaper story that I was the devil's daughter in the UK. Suddenly, it was like I was in another universe. And there I was with this handsome man in his white shirts, and he was middle class, and I'd never been near a man like him. I was bowled over. He was a writer, and I was Marilyn Monroe. We stuffed oily snakes in garlic. We supped good old brandy on nights where the hum of crickets kept us awake past the small hours. I was stupidly falling in love with him. He knew how to follow the Michelin-starred restaurants all around Aigremont and Saint-Tropez. I saw him as too good for me because of his job, big shop journalist. I then knew it was what I wanted to be, a journalist. Phil was not that bright and silly, and I knew I was somehow smarter than him. If he can do this, why can't I reasoned. Strolling along the bridge, arm in arm in the hot sun, we sang songs and made each other laugh at old wooden tables outside little sun-drenched bistros, sucking with wet lips on fresh peaches pulled out of chilled glasses of Moscato as music played and we let our eyes dance the dance of love. Every morning over coffee, Phil Hall coached me how to locate stories in the newspaper to delight newspaper editors. He wanted me to join him in his profession. I sat there over my coffee that tasted gorgeous, nothing like the instant in the working class house I grew up in, beautiful brewed coffee, and I envisaged us as a married power couple, Posh and Becks, set writers, sought after by everyone, F. Scott Fitzgerald and Zelda. I gazed at him and I was falling in love. Well, he chewed on a cigarette and we chatted over the phone to Bridget Bardot. She agreed to meet us, but then she cancelled due to her dogs getting sick. Phil taught me how to put together a newspaper story over the beautiful fresh ground French coffee and crumbling fresh croissants, our newly tanned bodies marbled by a brightening and waning yellow sun. There was a dog at the hotel. It scared me a bit, but he laughed. And I was happy. I was so happy in this other world. I never wanted to go home. On temperate evenings, as a dying marmalade light danced across the balcony, Phil taught me how to file copy to the news desk copy takers as our eyes danced away from each other's longing looks. We sipped champagne cœur in the room as he taught me how to locate the breadcrumb in a story to follow up on and how to be a good journalist. I felt enthralled that Phil allowed me access to this higher world, one of the men in white shirts who held pens instead of hammers. Glossy skyscrapers in the midst of London full of history. Westminster and St. Paul's, Mayfair and Whitehall. I love this world, its lush, opulent vibe. I want to be part of it. I want to be part of a world of power, not living where I was living in a working class stew with people that never did anything. In France, I lazed about in a polka dot bikini beside my Hemingway in a mimosa-scented breeze on the riverbank on such hot sunny days, believing I'd joined this world of top newspapers and book writers in London. I began to think that Phil was my soulmate. I had once visited a renowned psychic called Mike Baker. He told me that a man with the initial J would impact on me so hard. J would beat down my walls and he would locate the real me and kiss me back to life. Since all Mike Baker had come true, like you'd leave your job, you'd go to a place that would look like Greece, you'd meet someone called P. Everything came true. So all this about meeting a soulmate called J, or the initial J, who would impact on my life like a star hitting Earth or an asteroid. Since all he said came true, I waited for this J. I imagined myself in a white seed pearl dress. I went to marry J, whoever he was. I knew he must be my twin soul. I imagined we would have great sex, and I'd enjoy it for once. I was a romantic. Phil laughed when I told him. And then he said, hey, my nickname at the Sunday People's offices is Jolly Phil Hall. I'm the J that the psychic told you about. I believed him. Jolly Phil Hall. It seemed to fit. He was impacting my life. During that very hot night, as crickets croaked and the heat made us sweat, we made love for the very first time in Pont du Gard. I prayed to God that he was J. I prayed to God that this was like a honeymoon. Phil's caresses on the high count white cotton sheets in that beautiful hotel left me dead. I wondered what was going on. It was like I didn't want to be there all of a sudden. He was touching me. He was so handsome. He smelled so nice. He was my soulmate, Jay. And yet, I didn't want to be there. Who would I fall in love with? Another deeper part of me felt revolted by him. It was like my stupid side had fallen for his power and his charm, and another side of me, a cleverer side, was cringing and saying, oh, he's disgusting. Get away from him. So we sailed back to London. And as London got nearer and nearer, I felt sicker and sicker and more sad. Phil was still my boyfriend, and he still wanted me to become a Fleet Street journalist. He took me out to Joanna and Bootleggers. In the celebrity haunt Bootleggers, page 3 girls dined alongside rich Arabs, and the champagne flowed. I got back to the cheap Bayswater hotel that Phil had put me in, and we danced around. I paraded around in my underwear playing Madonna's Get Into the Groove. Bah, you gotta prove your love to me. He slowed it down and we slow danced to On Days Like These by Matt Monroe. We remembered France. We made love again. I hoped he was Jay, but I felt sick again. He stopped. What's up? You act like you don't even like me, like you have to drink all that beer, that lager, and I don't get it. I thought you liked me. I'm sorry. You need to get drunk to sleep with me. No, I don't need to get drunk. Just give me another sip of that lager. It was like my inner self that seemed to actively loathe him, and she came out when he tried to touch me. Afterwards, in Bootleggers over skinny fries, Phil felt guilty, he told me, but hadn't been paid for being a world exclusive front page for 2 weeks running. So dinner's my treat. It was burger and fries. I only had a few £100 savings left in my bank account. I was by this time homeless, jobless, since the scandal had broken. Don't worry, I'll teach you this business. You can work in Fleet Street, he promised me with a guilty grin. Hell, it never ceases to amaze me how he ruined lives. Look at the mess yours is in. You got no home, no job because of all this. Through his ongoing tuition, through his guilt, I actually became a bona fide journalist. With my full stripes, I bought a cheap one-way ticket to New York City, and like his baby bird leaving the nest, I rented a bedsit in a rough area of Brooklyn, New York City. I began to pound the streets of Manhattan, hunting news stories they'd enjoy back in the UK, like a bloodhound seeking a bone. I eagerly filed copy on stories from New York on Madonna's hair loss, Called in the paper, Madonna loses her mane, and Howard's Beach racism from a cheap bedsit. Phil was shocked how quickly I'd picked up his role, and he put the stories in the Sunday People under his own byline. He forgot to pay me for them, and I was destitute and starving, unable to pay my rent on my room or pay for food. I quickly discovered that anyone could write a story. Journalism was about getting people to talk to you. Hurt by my desertion to New York, Phil took his old journalist girlfriend called Tina Weaver back to the Pont du Gard, and he sent me a postcard from France to my bedsit in Brooklyn. I miss you. I wish it were you. Here, not her. It was over. Yet his world still infatuated me. I wanted to be part of it. I flew back to London and applied for employment as a rookie hack working for the News of the World news desk to the editor Greg Miskiw. Phil Hall had moved to the News of the World, so he was the editor and Greg Miskiw was his underling. Little did he know when he hired me that I was one of the victims who had had their lives ruined. I never wanted it to happen to me again. I wanted to find out all of their secrets, to help others like me, tip them off, screw it up for the press, who I hated. Phil ignored me as I sat in his newsroom. He was afraid of me. He was afraid I would talk about our love story, he with the devil's daughter dressed in scarlet. To get in with the other reporters, I giggled in corners and I gossiped about him. I lied that he had a really small willy just to make them laugh. I don't know if he hated me or not. At one of the Christmas parties, I saw him standing there staring at me. He looked. I looked at him, pretending not to be me, pretending I'd forgotten everything. The music was playing and our eyes met. And I looked away. I wasn't me anymore. I was someone else. I wasn't the girl he knew. I was someone else. And I seemed to be on some kind of mission. This someone else seemed to be taking off like a late freight. It shocked both Phil and me when my dizzying ascent in the newspaper industry materialised overnight. The News of the World had a strong appetite for my style of working. I seemed to know who to speak to and what to say to them to get a story. It wasn't about blagging. Hundreds of investigators who can do silly blagging applied to the papers all the time, and reporters also use this trick of getting stories. Actor John Ford was a brilliant blagger they all used. I had something different, but had nothing to do with the me who Phil had known, but this other me that had appeared when I had read the book Strangers Among Us. I had a weird skill of knowing things, but I shouldn't really know. Who to ring, what to say to them to get them to cough up their secrets. And it shocked even me. And I only knew how to do it after I'd gone to sleep on the problem. I would ask my deepest self or this deepest self, and in sleep that part communicated it back to the outer normal me. Reporters I confided this to sneered at me, but they still used me. It wasn't blagging to stand up every single reporter's stories. No, not blagging. My skill made other journalists envious. The most envious ones were those who termed themselves investigators. One of them was called Graham Johnson, who is now out to help Hollywood crush me and make out I'm a blagger or I'd done something illegal. But back then, Phil Hall watched with incredulity as my earnings rose from a junior hack's 25k to a giddy 100k a year. My accountant was a stickler for being proper, and I still have the proof of this in neat leather-bound books. It's not often working class girls earn the big bucks. I was shocked and I wondered what was going on. How come I could do this? I never was able to do it before. A friend of mine introduced me to a man called Hugh Burnett. He told me he was ex-BBC, but I read in his obituary that Hugh Burnett was actually MI6. He lived quite near to me and I began to go and see him. On his advice, I began to branch out and work for other newspapers, the Sunday Mirror, the Daily Mail and the Times. I used this gift and it seemed to work for me in this world. I became friends with the other journalists, Fiona Whitty, Dave Dillon, Dennis Rice, Matt Bell. Because of my unique skill, newspaper editors like Paul Dacre invited me to champagne parties at the Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday. People buy top cops and security services men. My skills grew, proving stories by garnering the correct information and proof. They called me Fleet Street's secret weapon, and Royal Hat Clive Goodman called it the Christine Hart magic. In a way, it was magic. I was proud. Well, at least I had some kind of skill others liked me for. Some reporters hated the rise of this dumb cluck blonde who once snogged a serial killer and hadn't been to journalism school. I felt their eyes watching me. Yeah, sure, I knew old PI tricks, but I didn't as much as turn as an ex-directory phone number. I knew they'd grass me up to their cop contacts, so I kept everything clean. I could smell them hating me. I could just look at a photograph and see a way into a celebrity's private life. After sleeping, I'd wake up and know just who to call and exactly what to say to extract information out of their minds, what to say to them to get them to open up to me. None of it was or is illegal. The editor rewarded me with money and arse licking, which was what my tiny broken ego needed. I reported what they were all up to back to the offshoots of the spy companies I used to work for. CIX Limited, which was Company X in French, C and then X, a firm owned by ex-MI6 officer Michael Oatley, started to hire me. They were investigating Fleet Street, especially the News of the World's use of the boys at Hereford. I disliked reporting back to my old world, but I somehow felt I had no choice. They were angry, but not at me. I was attending the Priory Clinic in Roehampton for weekly hypnotism to access my childhood. I found I could not access my childhood memories at all. I read that a man using therapy called EMDR, that was a veritable time machine, saw A-list Robbie Williams, Kate Moss, Ruby Wax. I felt honoured to be able to be seen by him. I went along for years and soon gossip spread and all my journalist peers knew that I had access to a cast of superstars. Of course, they pressured me to spy and look. I despised the idea of wandering the corridors of the Priory in my nightdress, a spy for the tabloids, crying about my childhood and envious of powerful, successful people's wealth and status. I thought I deserved fame like they had. I felt a loser, second rate, and I felt afraid of them and angry I wasn't one of them. But I never would have hated them enough to hurt them by spying on them for the gutter press. People asking you to do something is one thing, actually doing it is another. So I hung out with Ruby Wax and Marty Peller and enjoyed the Priory's West Wing and Centre Court and their fare of apple crumble and private parties. But I wondered why I wasn't famous like Catherine Zeta-Jones and Kate Moss. I was bitter. I had to lie. Whenever I was asked to spy, I had to lie. I had no choice. I'd say, yes, this one is in there, or yes, this one's not. Really angry they're abusing me by asking me. But I had no intention of letting them take what I loved away from me or get me arrested. No one was going to take my journalistic career off me. I worked hard at putting away pedophiles and exposing villains. Sometimes I played the wife of Mazza Mahmood. I was proud of all I did. The outcast who protected others. Fleet Street who enjoyed ruining lives. I saw myself as a secret good person. Maybe I should just stayed away from them. But what else had I? The devil's daughter. Reporter Graham Johnson found out that I was the devil's daughter. He passed around old copies of the Sunday People to everyone, with me on the cover. Oh my God, Chris is related to Ian Brady. What else is she hiding? What kind of sneaky person is she? And how can she do what she does? I think she's a hacker. She's only a blagger. Fiona Whitty took me out to dinner to find out the details that Graham was talking about. and I felt they were all waiting to hear back what she reported. News of the World editor Alex Marinchek knew the Ian Brady story was a farce and hated Phil Hall. He lost no chance in ribbing me. "Oh, Chris, how's your dear father, darling? How is Ian Brady? Daddy, how's Daddy? Ha ha ha. Oh, and how's Phil Hall? So, let me see. He not only made up a load of old shit to ruin your life, he got his leg over too. Oh, remind me, how much did he pay you? Oh, nothing. Oh, he's such a charmer, isn't he?" Phil Hall heard about this and punished Alex by sending him away to work in Belfast. I began to feel isolated again, but I was still getting results. My favourite editor, Chris Boffey, left the Sunday Mirror. Tina Weaver, Phil Hall's girlfriend, arrived to take it over. As soon as she did, she kicked me out. I didn't care. I had the Mail, the Times, Alison Boshoff, Rick Hewitt, Chris Boffey, Ian Cobain continued to use me, and I still work for the News of the World, but I preferred the Daily Mail, the Times, and Chris Boffey brought me in at the Telegraph, and I began to work on top investigations. Before Tina kicked me out, I got a Sunday Mirror press pass from Dennis Rice and Matt Bell, and it said Sunday Mirror staff reporter on it. Once I had that, I was able to interview people. I felt valued for the very first time in my life, and it felt good. I went to Daphne's. I met George Harrison. I felt as if I was somebody, not the working class girl who I'd been before, doing jobs where I might have got beaten up. "Hello, it's Peter Allen from the Daily Mail. Please may we borrow your genius?" Sometimes I felt a fraud because it was an inner separate part of me, standing up stories, doing all the clever stuff. She was different. She was still me. She just felt not like me. I wondered why I hadn't yet become an adult, or others around me were maturing, but I was at a standstill. I felt like a 15-year-old child. It irked me having to depend on a self that seemed not like me. I called this strong side Catherine, and the normal part of me Penny. I seemed to have separate parts. I noticed that about the serial killer Ian Brady. He had parts, and one of his parts was this Nazi doctor. I assumed that maybe adoption caused this part thing, and I decided to make a study of it. I didn't buy a flat with my 6-figure salary. I felt the money was dirty. After all, it was News International, tabloid wages. I was an NG reader, and money was a hook that had attachment, especially if it was from a bad source, and it could then rebound on you. The press ruined lives, so the money had hooks of this karma. I pulled out the hooks by merely wasting it. I bought shoes. Hugh Burnett, the ex-BBC producer, encouraged me to become a war reporter in Belfast, Northern Ireland. I had the idea that I would make a lot of money by writing a book on the real IRA. I got to know a ruthless terrorist leader called Liam Campbell, who lived in Dundalk, a no-go area for the British Army. Greg Miskey from the News of the World encouraged me to use my body to become a better reporter. I followed Greg's advice and appropriated the leader of the real IRA as my lover. I was suddenly ambitious to write a book. He was really easy to seduce. Once inside Dundalk, he invited me to his house. I became his lover. I had access to everything. I touched everything. I walked around inside his home. He trusted me because our sex was bonding and intense. I felt like I was in love with him. I didn't know why. I eventually knew his house, back to front. I knew all his hideaways. He walked around showing me this and that. My journalism on the real IRA became known for its accuracy. I thought about what I was doing. I knew that the British Army got killed if they went to XMG, which is known as Crossmaglen. Soldier Robert Narak from Ampleforth went there to look around, and he was chopped up. Ampleforth was a bit like my orphanage, a Catholic Jesuit-run place, and Robert Nayrek grew up there. His body was fed to the pigs after his spying mission failed. Yet I strolled around Crossmaglen whistling and breakfasted in Dundalk in their cafe opposite the Emerald Bar, their notorious pub. I kind of felt proud. I'd done something Nayrek had failed. Somewhere deep inside I felt, am I spying on them? But yet I was a working class girl and nobody asked me. So I felt that feeling must be just crazy. I'm just a journalist. I was soon taken out to dinner by all the editors of the broadsheet newspapers in Belfast about my stories being exact in detail. Rosie Gowan from The Guardian, Henry MacDonald from The Observer all brought me expensive dinners and begged me to introduce them to my contacts. I decided to take the more honest offer by Liam Clark of the Sunday Times to write for him. Sunday Times editor Liam Clark began to employ me properly and commissioned me to go to press conferences to give me work for the magazine, and I began to hang out with him on jobs such as meeting the UDA's Michael Stone. I'd recently got the Times the front page where I'd got the name of the man Bignell who was beheaded by ISIS. I was standing up stories when others couldn't. South Armagh Provisional IRA had morphed into the ultra-dangerous and unreachable Real IRA, and I began to make TV appearances on the BBC as a crime reporter. The Reals were not amenable to the offers of millions from the British government. They had just paid out £7 million to the INLA. I was tipped off by an INLA leader who had introduced me to a man called Dark Cloud, the INLA's newest leader. Paul confirmed their payout by coming to my house and telling me. I wrote it up for the Mail, and they gave me this sole byline. Thinking I was becoming a defence reporter, I joined the RAF on a voluntary basis as press officer. Dr. Mark Collins helped me handle the stress and told me how well I was doing. He was seeing Britney Spears in America, and when he flew out to his clinic in Hollywood, the Priory had always been my sanctuary, since undergoing Art Janov's primal therapy in Los Angeles, where John Lennon was also a patient. I called the hotshot, strong, seductive side of me Catherine. The name I picked was Catherine Trammell in Basic Instinct. I did that because this part owned my sexuality. I didn't seem to have a sexuality at all, but this clever part of me did have a sexuality. I just didn't know what her objective was, but there seemed to be an objective. Touch seemed to be important. My work was bothering me. I told Dr. Collins, I feel kind of odd because it's like I wake up naked next to the head of the Real IRA in the middle of Dundalk, and I feel really scared. It's like I wasn't the person that had gone there. And I know I've gone there, but I kind of wake up and think, what am I doing? And it felt crazy to be there. I'd wake up and feel trapped. It's like the stupid side of me would wake up, and I'd look down and see my body and things around, and a sleeping enemy of the state lying naked beside me. And I'd know that I'd been with him, but yet I hadn't. And I would feel really scared. And I would remember it, but wonder why I would do something like that. It just wasn't something I would do. What English reporter would? These were highly dangerous men. Getting close to them was one thing, but this was ridiculously close. I was buried away in the Irish countryside in a no-go area, and I'd have to play a role so I could leave, make out I felt sick or something. And I was so terrified he'd chop me up like Robert Nayrek and feed me to Slab Murphy's snuffling pigs. I would have to pretend that I really liked him and pretend to get out of there. And I would feel so scared until I was safe back at the airport. And yet I would go back again and again. For my trouble, the News of the World called me our girl, on my front and middle page spread on the Real IRA. I couldn't work it out why one minute I was enjoying myself to get stories and the next minute I wanted to scream for help. It's like this side of me came and went and I never knew when she'd leave or appear to wake up to her life, and it was my life. It's like she lived on full volume, minus any kind of fear and with an agenda. My career grew via her. Word spread and I was approached for the Observer by a lawyer who turned out to be CIA. He told me he wanted me to get close to ISIS in the UK by recruiting young Muslims to go undercover in mosques. The CIA served me up some books on ISIS and Bin Laden. I was pampered by them and then left alone. I never heard from them again. I knew they'd probably tap my phone and come into contact with my douche side. I knew it was who they wanted. They wanted Catherine. I saw myself as a good journalist, whining and dining, leaking information here and there, a player in a game I had no idea of. I had no idea, but I knew I never clocked off. I afforded rent on an expensive London penthouse, and I was happy for a while. But I noticed it was only me. At weekends, I just longed for work week to begin again. I ate alone. Marks and Spencer's ready meals. I watched TV, I watched films, mostly about people going undercover. And I cried, because I don't think anyone should ever be that alone, yet know so many people. Suddenly John Boyle appeared back in my life. He saw where I was living, and I felt afraid. Something about seeing John Boyle made my stomach churn. It was almost as if a bell had gone in a kind of dream, and the bell was saying, it's time to wake up now. This isn't your life. It's a dream we've given you, but now we're pulling you out of it. It was all over. Forget your journalist crap. Just give me the details and your contacts. I had no intention of giving him anything. And my adoptive aunt showed her face. She was still a sister in the Vatican of Rome, and she told me that I must let John Boyle inside my Fleet Street world. It'll allow you to concentrate more on book writing. So I found myself introducing John Boyle into Fleet Street. Thus Fleet Street met phone hacking. I had no idea of it, or that John was master of it. I'd never even heard of it. John met up with Greg Miskew through me, and then Greg dumped me. Greg and Phil Hall childishly adored all the illegality John Boyle had to offer, and they dumped me like a hot potato. They'd never liked my hocus pocus. They wanted real data, and that was something that I couldn't get. But I'd whet their appetite, yet they hated it. They had to depend on a flake like me. When I found out everything, I couldn't work out John Boyle. He literally had millions. Property in Aspen, property in Sussex, the trophy wife. Why risk prison for carrying out illegality for stupid people like them? Greg and Phil soon wanted to drop John Boyle because he charged about $6,000 per inquiry. They decided in typical newspaper hates private eye style to steal his little office boy called Glyn Mulcair that John had trained to hack and steal and paid very little. So the green office boy Mulcair, who didn't know much about private investigations because he was a footballer, was suckered by Greg Miskew and went to work for the News of the World. Since Boyle had been working for the Sunday Mirror on my coattails, they made Mulcair go under contract to not work for Tina Weaver. John had no idea they'd stolen his little office boy. But they decided when they stole his little office boy to not pay him the $200,000 they owed him, just to tell him to get stuffed. Greg said, "Get lost," playing the hardshore, the petty villain, yet he was so out of his league. John knew MI6, 14 int, he knew everybody that was anybody. So he went to Andy Coulson over Greg Miskew's head. I think you'll pay me, Andy, or you'll find that I'll inform all the politicians and all the celebrities you paid me to hack. Andy Coulson paid up straight away, but John was still bruised and still angry. I wonder who they've got instead, or maybe they're trying to do it themselves. Who knows? But, oh well, I'll write it off. Over lunch with me, Greg Miskew spoke over and over to a man called Glyn non-stop. I knew that this was the way he had once spoken to me, asking me this and that over every problem. So I thought it's funny, Glyn, and the name went round my head. Later on, I met up with John, and we, of course, ended back at my flat in Shad Thames. We were like kind of, what is it they call it? Fuck buddies. And so we ended up in bed, and I said, hey, you know, after they dropped me for you, I think they dropped you for a man called Glyn. John shot up in bed. Oh, God, I don't think they quite know who I am. He recognised the name immediately. His office boy, who had just said, I think I'll leave and go back to playing football. And then Greg had said, yeah, we're not going to pay you, John. Get lost. While he grabbed his boy. It was kind of funny. Ex-orphan boy John was not a man to cross. I even suspected he had his enemies murdered. He hung out and worked with 14th Int and MI6 and top cops who ruled the UK. I don't suppose it was hard for him to destroy the news of the world, but it was fast in coming. Greg was lucky. In revenge, John grassed them all up to the cops. The news of the world closed down. Greg and Glyn went to prison, and Greg got the shit beaten out of him in his cell, which I suspected was John's personal touch. No one mentioned John Boyle and the worldwide expose of the phone hacking. Not even the man who called me York in his book, Nick Davies. John was a ghost. Another man was shit scared. James Hanning from the Sunday Independent on Sunday has written the book The News Machine, said to me, Chris, I can't write about John Boyle. No one can. He's rich as Croesus. He'll destroy us all. Safe in his £8 million mansion in Sussex, where the boys of Operation Wheating couldn't even get inside his gates, and hacked off. Don't seem to give a shit about him. George Clooney paid the Guardian's investigative top man Nick Davies so much money that he retired. Yet the movie was never made. Davies just got his payoff to keep quiet that MI6 were the ones who brought in phone hacking. Phone hacking wasn't a victory for the public. It was a setup, so the papers no longer did any exposés on human trafficking and paedophiles. The UK was rife with vampiric pedos in high places, but no one ever got nicked for it. Newspapers shit themselves after the phone hacking scandal that they might end up beaten up in a cell like Greg Miskew. So the state now had full control of mainstream media, and it was all PR stories. Sometimes they would stamp investigates on a story, but that was just a mockery. Hungry young bucks entering Fleet Street from university who would sometimes get experience working as investigators and then become feisty young independent journalists, or feisty editors bucking the system, or go off freelancing like John Pilger around the world, kicking down closed doors, would now no longer get any training. Old-style investigations and exposés died with the phone hacking scandal. A darkness had risen. No more Clark Kent Superman to save ailing Gotham City. Gotham City had just endured a human meat pie thrown at it in a wave of millions of immigrants. To them, it seemed like a victory. The press been spanked. Yeah, we've won. Phone hacking, we've got them, the dirty little phone hackers. Ha ha ha. No one was spanked. Well, perhaps Rupert Murdoch was spanked by his lovely new wife, Jerry Hall, in the privacy of their little bedroom. Jerry was his reward for taking the hit of a small discomfort of renaming the news of the world after John supposedly burned it down. No, at the top they all know each other. It hadn't died. It was just renamed The Sun on Sunday. The Kit Kat machine was still in the same part of the room it had been when it was the News of the World newsroom. Nothing was closed. But now it didn't carry out any kind of investigations, nor did any of mainstream media. Occasionally it stamped the term investigations on a story, but it was all propaganda for the elite. No longer a journalist, I went off and gave birth to a child. I called him Arthur Charles. I soon discovered that being an ex-Fleet Street journalist meant nothing whatsoever to the rich stay-at-home wives in London's suburbia. My son was totally left out by the rich Stepford wives in the village because I was a single career woman. The wives of the vampires loved their free mansions and their gifted 4x4s and their coffee mornings. They were lazy, they were evil, and they hated children. Their own were farmed out on non-stop playdates, and if you were not part of the hive, your kids would get hurt by them. We lived in rented accommodation and I was unemployed, so my child was lined up to get the shit kicked out of him by the women. All the parties, all the treats and trips run by the mothers, they made sure my little boy was left out. And that was 4, 5 years old, 6 years old. My little boy howled as he watched the other kids in the class go snaking hand in hand off to a balloon party he was intentionally left out of. Pain made my son kinder-hearted. He vowed when he grew up to build free housing for mothers and kids who didn't have men to support them. He vowed that in the community housing he would have amazing parties and no one would be left out of those parties. Not black, not white, nor rich, nor poor, nor married or unmarried, because I know how much it hurts, Mummy, he told me. I was smeared with a phone hacking, even though I had no idea even how to do it, or that John Ball was likely to do such a thing. So I was unemployable, and I couldn't support my son. That really hurt me. I couldn't go back to spying because I knew I was a journalist who would report. They knew I was a journalist who would report back on any illegalities they were up to at the agencies. So there I was, a busy applying for jobs at store checkouts at Tesco and not getting them because the EU immigrants were getting them and they were younger. I was absolutely terrified. I became scared, depressed, and feared my son would suffer because I was an arsehole. I tried to find work. While I was looking, I appeared on GMTV to talk about bullying in schools. I was still doing various appearances on BBC Channel 4 to talk about Ian Brady, plus the BBC World Service. But it was all for free, and it didn't help paying the rent or feeding us. None of it paid anything, so I was starving in a garret when I finally published a book through Hodder and Stoughton. Searching for Daddy inspired people, so they said. Reading it was like having a good friend. It made me proud I'd helped others who'd been sexually abused or violently abused in childhood. It was listed as Sunday Times bestseller, and it got to 15 in the charts and number 3 in the W.H. Smith charts. I felt proud I'd achieved something. Peter Allen, meanwhile, recommended me to The Sun, and I worked for them for a while. They became curious about the Priory, and I hated that. I fobbed them off by regurgitating info they'd told me. I needed to support myself, and writing advances were not lucrative unless you were Joan Collins. I enjoyed the good stuff from The Sun and worked for them as a reporter, assisting people like Andy Parry, Chris Ferrer and Guy Patrick. In 2009, one of their reporters, I won't name him, did a bad scam on Heather Mills, then threw me a dummy phone to lie to her. It was a really crass nonsense investigation that had nothing to do with me. Heather screamed at me for half an hour how she was treated like Yoko. I tried to calm Heather down. I'd always admired her for her work on exposing the health risks of cow's milk. Fleet Street men hated her because of her strength and delighted in trying to degrade her. Nick referred to her as the slut. I was sacked out of the blue over Nick's complete bullshit investigation after 6.5 years of helping The Sun get front pages. The Daily Mail let go of me at the same time because Nick said that I actually was a private investigator rather than a reporter, and they were no longer touched by Fleet Street. John Boyle, scared of me talking out about him, introduced me to one of his very rich ex-MI6 chums, and I got work spying on nuclear plants for KCS Limited, the ex-MI6 firm I started to work for in Knightsbridge. Yet every task seemed to hold a risk of me being murdered. They told me the risk was there up front, but in the end I had to refuse because I had my son to keep alive for. I waited patiently for Jay. I believed everything that psychic had told me because everything it had said come true. I had no savings, so I began to feel the skids underneath us. I couldn't sleep. I was so afraid of life in poverty. We'd no home that we owned. I was middle-aged. I feared most for my beautiful little boy, Arthur, who was my whole life. trees shed their leaves in a flurry of autumn 2012 as I sat mid-publication tour on my second book. I'd worked really hard for over 5 years, writing non-stop, and it was published by Transworld. I sat in a quaint little English bookshop in London on a book signing for fans of a book called In for the Kill. I'd worked for 3 years researching the book, which was called A True Story of Hunting Evil. I'd researched the book with cops and serial killers, and I was absolutely drained. I was bringing up a child alone, I was no income, and I was working 10-hour days, and it wasn't a great mix. Transworld hasn't given me any advance, so I was hoping the second published book would sell. Meanwhile, Hollywood, via Jane Campion's sister Anna Campion, told me she wanted to direct a movie of my life, and later on another producer came along that hit Sunday Mirror. With Sienna Miller set to play me, a story appeared in the Sunday Mirror about Sienna Miller playing me. The story sat online mocking me. In the end, there was no movie because Miramax told Anna Campion that my abuse was too depressing. I felt that all my work was for nothing. The book wasn't selling because nobody knew it was out there. I was broke and I felt I'd worked for the last 5 years for nothing. I'd also spent all our savings as I was writing. The gamble hadn't paid off, so I really hated myself. For the first time, I thought about self-harming, but I didn't do it. But the hate for myself was absolutely palpable. I saw how other women had done it right. Got husbands, made sure their kids were in secure houses, but I'd screwed up. Hadn't picked a man who'd stood by us. He'd found another he'd fallen in love with. He wasn't my Jay. My attempt to get us a house from my writing had failed. I really cursed myself for failing my son. I told myself, you're a fuck up. You can't do anything right. You're an arsehole. I tried to do book signings to push the book myself. It seemed futile. I felt really tired. It was fruitless. The shops were always empty. One day, as I sat doing a book signing in London, I looked up and noticed there was a dark-haired stranger in the London Waterstones where I was signing copies of my new book. She shoved a copy of my book under my nose. I felt anxious, but I picked up my pen to sign it. What's your name? I was surprised by her accent, New York American. Secondly, by what she said. Hey, I'm here to tell you your life isn't a journalist story. You're a mind-controlled monarch slave. What? What? Pardon, what? Your secret weapon. I'm not a secret weapon. She went on, seemingly ignoring me. I flew miles across an ocean to tell you this. You don't know, do you? I put down my pen. I felt she was crazy and I was an open target just sitting there. You're a meticulously produced, costly asset, the Roman Catholic Church. The you sitting here in front of me is merely a front for Alice. Alice is inside you. She's an alter personality. She can only be triggered by your owners. Alice is psychically gifted, like its dark side, dark occult. They run you to get close to enemies of theirs. You touch, you bring it back. Intimate touch is the conduit. Take information from one body, feed it back to another body. Downloading, uploading. But it's not you, it's her, Alice. Can't you feel her? Pardon me? What? Pardon? I signed my book for her, but I felt she was a complete nutbag. You don't believe me. You do know the Priory is a programming center? You go there? It's where they send Hollywood mind control slaves for the top-up programming. It's a sister of the Tavistock where Dr. Green works. I couldn't believe I read your book about all you've done, and you don't even know you're a monarch slave. What? Dr. Green? It's Dr. Collins who runs the Priory, and many others in the USA. Hang on, you flew here from America to London to tell me this bollocks? I handed her back my book with my signature. Human trafficking, not madness. You know about sex trafficking? Human trafficking? Seen the film Trafficking? Seen it with, who's it got in it? Hey, yes, I flew here. Why? Because it happened to me. I know that once I told you, you'd shout it from the rooftop. So I flew here even though I have varicose veins and I'm 82 years old. She was very confident and she had to be mad. she kept on. She sat down and she carried on telling me crazy stuff that Brian Harvey would think was really mad. But you know what, Brian? I didn't believe it either. Hey, I know you think I'm crazy, but I've read your book. I've seen the invisible puppet strings. Alice can get out of a place and download information back to other men, skin to skin. Ever seen the movie Long Kiss Goodnight? Well, they're telling the story of monarch mind control slaves. You pick it up, you drop it back. Only trouble is, you keep swapping in when she's there. Screwing it up for her because you're scared shitless. The nasty creeps you're spying on. And who wouldn't be? They're the most dangerous men on the planet. Hell, they want you to spy on ISIS. They don't care if you end up beheaded. You're getting old. Soon you won't be able to do it. And then you'll be no use to them. Like now. You're no use to them now. That's why you're on the scrap heap. You got nothing. They always end up bankrupt with nothing. It's called the freedom train, and you've been tossed by it, baby. Oh, I felt dizzy, yet I wanted to laugh. What? A toss by it? I'm not has-been. What a bitch. She raised her voice above the din of the shop. The best spy an English can make is a spy who doesn't know she's a spy. They also harvested your heart, so you can't love, can you? They broke your trust in the orphanage. With torture, violence, sexual abuse. Hell, you children, unrestricted lab rats to experiment on. Kids no one wants in Catholic orphanages. Free guinea pigs. Nobody girls that nobody wants to be trafficked. I would know if this were true. I'd know it. I thought of Bishop Philip Harvey, who was a father to me in the kids' home. He'd received an OBE. Why is a bishop receiving bloody OBE? All of a sudden, I started to feel really sick. The American grinned at me. Alice earned you your rich flat and your fancy car you talked about in this book. Come on, you've written it all here. You said you didn't even have a college education. How could you possibly work on Fleet Street? £100 a year you earn. It's not your skills you're using. You're a monarch. They help you. You have psychic skills. They attach demons to one of your altars. That was it. That was too much for me. Attaching demons to one of my altars? She must have been completely barkingly mad. I didn't want anything to do with this madness. I looked up at her. Well, actually, I did sense something had gone on in that orphanage. I mean, I was never really adopted. My adopted parents brought me back twice a year. That's weird, isn't it? Anna burst out. You're their slave. You're human trafficked, branded like livestock. Sex slave. I'm sorry, but I don't believe any of this. She shook her head. Male children used for wet work and CIA cleanup. Serial killers, all programmed experiments. Fine choosing unwanted kids, long-term in hospitals and bostels. Kids like us for spies or to carry out mute work. The beautiful ones, they're called presidential models. Used for well passed around. She collapsed herself down next to me, and seeing her face close up, I could see she had once been a really, really beautiful American girl. She spoke softly. All you have to know right now is that your front altar, you now, looking at me, doesn't know about Alice. I bit my lip. Whenever she spoke about Alice, I started to feel a sense of fear, almost like a sense of foreboding. It was like she was talking about Catherine, who I had called Catherine. She carried on talking to me, but I was barely listening. She said things like, you see life through a dark lens, so you give way to her when she comes knocking. Black magic, ritualistic violence, that seals the program into place. Your mother was your witch handler, part of the cult, the Roman Catholic Church. The rituals they used to create mind control slaves called moonshot. Moonshot created by Aleister Crowley. When your masters trigger you to click your red shoes, You morph into her. Alice feels powerful. She's powerful and psychically gifted. Then you chase the White Rabbit. He appears in your dreams. White Rabbit's your handler who controls you on missions. Slaves of the Vatican. What? White Rabbit comes to you in dreams and suggests what you do. Then you act out his commands in real life. I don't have desires. I have no desire. My book on Island had never been written. There was no book. All my ideas just seemed to fade when, after I'd done all the work getting close to these people, I stared at her, but all this sounds like it sounds mad. She ignored me. Oh, it's very clever. Security service are about 50 years ahead of us, mere mortals. I stood up. I'd heard enough. I felt just like Brian Harvey. I wanted to dismiss anybody that talked about monarch mind control as a crank. I didn't want to be locked up. I certainly didn't want to be out there talking about it. Suddenly I recalled a really hot day in the summer in Belfast. I remembered being in the Gorchin Glen, lying with the real IRA leader in the wilds of this glen in Ireland. We sunbathed by a river and it was a really hot day and we both took our tops off. All of a sudden, after laying there, I suddenly stood up and began to shake and cry. He lost his temper and shouted, "You're like two different people. I'm going sick to death of this shit. One's scared and crazy. Look at you now, sobbing and shaking. It's like you don't even fucking know me. The other one, she's exciting, sexy devil may care. She's a wildcat in my bed and I'm in love with her. But you nutter. Do you want to go home now, I suppose? I want to go home. I'm scared. I don't know where I am. I'm scared. I'll drive you home. I'm sick of this, though. Suddenly I knew he meant Catherine. I'd called her Catherine. I'd called her that because of her power. She held men in the palm of her hand. Her sex was wild, insatiable, like she wanted to eat them or something. And that's why they liked her. I just assumed that Catherine was a strong part of me, yet it wasn't an aspect of me. It was like someone else entirely. It was Catherine who had done all the impressive work for the newspapers. I was Penny, the arsehole. Catherine was Alice. It was like having on and off amnesia, waking up to someone else's life and yet it was your own life, and yet it wasn't amnesia because I remembered everything. It was a terribly dangerous life. This stranger knew all about it. She kept talking about Catherine, yet calling her Alice. I saw it so clearly. Catherine was Alice. I had a problem, maybe. Maybe it was all bullshit. I was so bloody confused. Maybe listening to Anna was my fatal mistake of slipping down the rabbit hole. I searched online like a hypochondriac, thinking they had cancer when they didn't. I googled monarch mind control. The writers, mostly American, believe that the deep state created puppets, monsters who shot up schools and committed serial murder for experiments to repeal gun laws. The girls, like Kathy O'Brien, were used as spies or agent provocateurs and had genie-in-a-bottle style ultra-sexualized personalities. They believe that these projects use girls in sexual human trafficking to pick up information and download it back to the deep state. Shattered, traumatized girls and boys from care homes, vulnerable minds honeycombed and then hypnotized with themes of occult books containing triggers. They used kids who were in long-term hospitals or children's homes, unwanted kids to experiment on and use. I was horrified by this Alice in Wonderland macabre, especially as one of my favourite books. If I was under control by something outside of myself, then they could jerk me at any moment. I was relieved to hear a man called James Casbolt, who made YouTube videos about life in a Catholic orphanage in Canada and calling us super soldiers, saying that the program broke down at age 40 and then the victim would usually end up poor because they had been used to living in a certain way and now couldn't cope when trying to look after themselves and getting work for themselves. It all ran horribly true for my life. Feeling scared, I talked to Mark Collins back at the Priory. I told him all about Anna and how I was researching this mind control and how my mixed up life of psychic urges finally made sense to me. Yet Dr. Mark Collins was confident it was nonsense. Do you feel that this Monarch program will absolve you of all your failures? Failures of no good marriage and no real friends, Christine. You've nothing wrong with you, I keep telling you. You've just got low self-esteem. Now you found this out, you hope it means that there's something wrong with you, but there's not. Your son was left out in that village because you weren't married. That's the end of it all. Just find a man. Find a man and join in with the other women. Enjoy your body. Try to enjoy sex for once. Why are you like this? I swallowed hard. I was waiting. I'm saving myself for Jay. Oh, come on. That's absolutely ridiculous because a psychic told you about Jay. What a load of nonsense. Now go out, join Match.com and try and find a man. I went down the stairs from his office, feeling sick and sad. So it was true. I was just a dumb failure and a struggling single mother fuck up. The stuff about Alice had made so much sense, but it was just a loser's way of coping with the fact they'd lost in life. I was in poverty, I was a loser, and it was all my own doing, not someone else's. I wasn't a puppet, I was just an idiot. I was so grateful for my beautiful child, yet so filled with self-hatred that I hadn't provided a stable home, just rentals. I vowed to forget this bullshit nonsense and work on earning money to get my son a permanent home and holidays like other children. We hadn't afforded one in years. I joined Match.com, yet my heart wasn't in it. I felt deep down that if I did have a man, I would want a man who would clean out my heart and bring me out of my numbness I existed inside, end my loneliness with just one kiss, make the mess of my life just perfect in 1 second. And a man like that just really didn't exist. It was 2012 and a balmy August evening. I just put my son to bed and read to him. Back downstairs, I poured a gin and tonic and added some lemon. I sat on my settee surfing the TV. I flicked through the films, but there was nothing good. I flicked and flicked all through the TV channels. There were so many of them these days, but all of them were nonsense and rubbish. I came across a documentary about a very famous American serial killer called the Hillside Strangler. I went to flick past. I'd certainly had enough of bloody serial killers, but something about his voice made me stop. I heard something familiar in it as he boasted about his vile murders. He was called Kenneth Bianchi, and he was the notorious Hillside Strangler. They said that he had an alter personality called Steve, and it was Steve who killed and strangled the 13 women. I turned up the TV in spite of myself. Kenneth Bianchi confessed to having the killing alter Steve who murdered 13 girls. My ears pricked up. Here was this alter thing again. Strangler Kenneth Bianchi grew up in a Roman Catholic children's home and then went on to join the Vatican in a priest seminary. I turned up the TV. Bianchi stood belligerently boasting, but not as blue-eyed Ken. This time he was inky-eyed Steve, his wicked killing alter. I killed that one. Yeah, this one Angela killed. I did this broad. This one, I don't know. This one he killed. This one, I don't know. This one he did. This one I did. I don't know that bitch. That one I did. Angie killed that one. Yep, I did that one. They did this broad. I heard something familiar in his obscene boasting about torturing and murdering. I heard the same energy patterning in his voice as the Nazi doctor personality I'd heard in Brady. I felt I was listening to this same entity. It filled me with a kind of horror. What the hell is it? Didn't actually feel as if it was human. I wrote to Bianchi straight away and he replied almost immediately, despite Hugh Burnett telling me that he would never reply to anybody's letters. After exchanging 2 letters with Kenneth Bianchi from his prison in America, I managed to get a commission from Merope Mills at The Guardian to go jump on a plane to interview him. Bianchi had sent me dates where I could visit him One of them was February the 14th, and that was the only day when there were 2 days in a row that I could go out there and interview him. Merope Mills wanted to call the piece Valentine's Day with the Hillside Strangler, and she gave me 2,000 up front for the first half of the story. I should have sent setup all along, but I didn't. Despite me being commissioned by Merope, she ended up by putting my piece in Reader's Experience, leaving out the fact I went to see Bianchi as a journalist, and she had sent me, calling it Woman Befriends Serial Killer. Yeah, she needed to smear me and make herself look better by making me look bad. But going back to the story and ignoring that side of it, I flew thousands of miles into the mountainside prison of Walla Walla in USA to look into the eyes of Hillside Strangler Kenneth Alessio Bianchi in the Indian town Walla Walla in the mountains near Seattle. I sat with serial killer number 2, a man who had murdered 13 women. I tried not to feel afraid as I watched his pale blue eyes of Ken morph into the black inky eyes of Steve. It seemed like the ink was pooling into them as he switched alter personalities. The blue-eyed Ken was just an average man, but the inky-eyed one, who liked to inject girls with bleach, gas them and experiment on them with torture, scared me absolutely shitless. I could almost feel this Nazi doctor inside of him, just as I had felt it inside Ian Brady. I almost felt as he was going to leap up and stick a needle in my cheek to administer electric shock. After 16 hours and 2 days spent in his company, I stood up to leave for the last time. I realised suddenly with horror that he was going to kiss me. He leaned forward and slobbered into my mouth. "Oh, I like you, Chris," he whispered, drawing back. "But let's see how it goes with us, yeah?" What? I don't like you like that." My head became lighter and something lurched forward, forcing herself against him. It's almost as if a part of me was hungry for his inky-eyed self. She pushed and pulled at his shirt. Suddenly, his inky black eyes returned to pale baby blue. I felt repelled and suddenly pulled back. He pulled back off me. He had switched back to this blue-eyed, and he was curious about me. "Hang on, what the hell are you doing? What are you doing in here with me? Don't you like nice things, Chris? Don't you feel you deserve nice things, and yet you're in here in prison with a dirtbag like me?" Blue-eyed Ken leaned forward and suddenly put his mouth to my forehead. Then he looked intensely into my eyes. "What is the matter with you? Are you some sick little bitch? What's going on with you? Why are you here in a prison?" I knew he knew about parts, about alters, about not knowing who the hell you were or why you did the things that you did and ended up in prison or in the bed of a dangerous stranger. A black-eyed girl inside me twisted in his searchlight. He spoke softly. "I see you in there. Why don't you come out? I'm going to call her Minerva. Let her be birthed by me." He held me tight and whispered. As he did, I felt ice thaw, and as it cracked, it hurt so much, because as it cracked, it brought a flood of the most horrific memories. I saw an altar and a priest lifting a chalice up and the Holy Communion. He was wearing a hood, and then he turned. But as he turned, it wasn't a human face. It was the face of a lizard with a long tongue. Deep black oil like pain flooded me. Catherine is so hard, so fucked up, so lonely. She was trapped inside this prison of ice that was cracking all around her, born of lashes with a stick, created by the breath of a demon in the hidden parts of the Roman Catholic Church. His kiss cracked the prison open as the light of reality burned and burned. Outside the prison, I slumped in the hide car, and I sobbed and I sobbed, and I saw how twisted my life was, how lost I was in a kind of walking dream. This conjurer's cave of my life was not my life. And for the very first time, I got down on my knees and I prayed. I prayed and prayed to a man that they had beaten to death. I called on Jesus. when I got back to the UK. Hacked off paid for my new home in return for helping me destroy the press I'd worked for. They brought me this isolated house on the shady Thames riverside, and I brought a variety of rescue birds to give them the best life I could. I found out I adored animals. At Christmas 2017, a year after I ceased all communication with Kenneth Bianchi and after I'd published In for the Kill, Kenneth Bianchi, the Hillside Strangler, sent me a photograph of himself sitting in his cell. He had his head shaved and a moustache. It had inky eyes. It was his killing ulcer. I was tired that day and I fell asleep holding it. In my dream, I dreamt I was in Germany and I was with my twin brother, a 12-year-old brother, Jack, whom I absolutely adored. An evil Nazi doctor kept us imprisoned, even though we were just children. He experimented on us with needles, injecting bleach and gassing us. So much daily infliction of torture. We both ran off in the snow. Eventually we died in the freezing ice rather than go back and face our lives. We walked into the light and then we became separated. I shouted back to Jack that I would search through time to find him and I would never give up. I woke up and I sat up in bed and I put the light on. I looked straight into the inky eyes of the man in the picture and I don't know how I knew. Kenneth Bianchi was Jack, who had once been my twin in a previous life. Jack, who I'd searched for inside this life, yet not known it. He had been split into parts in the programs, and now the real part of them had been programmed. I was lucky that Bianchi had affected me so much when I visited him. Yes, Jack had bashed down my walls and pulled out the real me. Jack had kissed me awake out of my living nightmare. Jack had broken the evil spell over me. And I'd been waiting for Jay. If one believes that more things happen in heaven and earth than mere man is aware of, then one could believe that this dirty, demonic man in cell 3 for the rest of his life had somehow healed me and that he was Jay that the psychic had told me about. Some Christians online met up with me on a special day in August 2017. 2017. They baptised me in the freezing cold sea in Brighton. I plunged right under the sea. With the salty taste of seawater in my mouth, I received the open heart of Jesus. I cried so much my salt tears mixing with the salt of the tea. They say that when Jesus comes into a cold heart, he breaks down all the splits. He reclaims his own and he calls his lost children back home. I knew I had a platform, my writing and my radio show. I wanted to give something to humanity. I wanted to serve others. And I wanted to expose the Vatican and those that ruled this earth for what they were. A guest on my radio show was expert on monarch programs, Fritz Springmeier. He was author of a book of the controllers of this world, exposing the bankers, exposing the bloodline families. It was called Bloodlines of the Illuminati. Fritz and I became good friends. He told me that the leading Nazi, Dr. Joseph Mengele, known as the Doc to Death, masterminded human trafficking of the Monarch Control Program. Yes, Brian Harvey, it's not cuckoo, it's for real. And many, many people believe it, not just a few women on YouTube, babes. He had specialised in MK Ultra using blonde-eyed Aryan twins to try and create a master race. He had also overseen Liebesborn manufacturing blue-eyed blondes in orphanages because they were the best ones to carry out MK Ultra on. I thought of my orphanage. The girl and man they threw up as my parents had dark colouring, yet my colouring was Aryan. I knew I would never meet my real father. Joseph Mengele died in 1979. Dr. Mengele was daddy of the programs. He had, according to expert Fritz Springmeier, pushed his own essence inside the mind control program to make himself immortal. The Nazis had been experimenting and made contact, some say, of the tall whites, others greys or reptilians, or others ET or demonic entities. The Nazis' vicious occult experiments had been second to none. Aleister Crowley and Jack Parsons had opened portals and let a lot of them have further access to the DNA of humanity. The occultist Nazis who wanted to be immortal were taken by the CIA. In Project Paperclip, and given a high place inside positions in America. Some believe Dr. Mengele now called himself Dr. Green. I had heard him inside Strangler Kenneth Bianchi whilst he butchered about torturing girls. I had seen him hiding just inside Ian Brady's vacant eyes. I'd smelt his handiwork in the horrific aftermath of the Omar bomb. Victims came forward for me to interview. Fritz said I was the same as Candy Jones, the CIA doll asset spy exposed in the 70s. It was exciting for a while, but there were lots of people claiming it had been done to them, and often it hadn't been. Some even stole my own story. We remained in poverty. It felt like a freak show, so I decided to just plain shut up about it. After all, Anna had warned me to do just that. You can't attack the infrastructure, but if you want to be killed, just shout it from the rooftops and you'll die, or they'll put you in prison. Reader, I didn't know whether it was true or not. How could I know for sure? But I felt my first duty was to protect my son, so I shut down all mention of things like that. My radio shows were about unusual things, but I didn't much talk about myself. As I started to do shows about different things, about other people that had suffered, leaving behind woo-woo stuff, I began to notice something sinister. It was too late. I'd rattled too many cages. A famous professor who lectured in journalism called Professor Brian Cathcart was announcing online I was a data thief and should be locked up. Brian is on the left picture here with comedian Steve Coogan and Nick Clegg MP. Graham Johnson began to ring me and throw money at me and take me out on dates to a cosy French restaurant in Kew with MP Evan Harris. Evan warned me over the lemon tart that my life would become very stressful if I didn't cooperate to help Lily Allen and all the other victims like Sir Elton John. I tried to read Evan, but he seemed cloaked. I'd been approached by a film company and I was wide for sound during those dinners. Graham got the BBC involved and a reporter from Panorama came to meet me. It was the BBC who then, through Graham, paid for me to go to Rendlesham. It was an all-expensive paid break for me and Arthur at Seckford Hall. I was enjoying the attention despite having really bad nightmares about grey aliens carrying out dental work in my mouth after abducting me. I did a radio show from there with Miles Johnson. Graham, fresh out of prison, was throwing me Max Mosley and Hugh Grant's money. He promised me Hollywood would take my story of what happened to me as a monarch slave at the hands of the Vatican and expose this human trafficking. Graham told me Hugh Grant had spoken to Charlize Theron, who read my book and wanted to play me. Why did I listen? And yet at the time I was hanging out with Anne Hardy, Tom Hardy's mother, and Tom Hardy was close to Charlize. So Anne told me she loved my book, In for the Kill, and had passed it to Tom. So it felt like everything was going full circle. Yet if you've decided to fight for the good side, you'll mostly encounter poverty and good things won't happen. Just bad things will happen. They fly for ones that are part of the hive. If you aren't part, you have to take up your cross and be prepared for bad times to hit. What had Jesus come here to teach us? What did he say he was? He said, I am the gate out of this. We're not here to become part of it. We're here to find our way out. I moved to a house that Hugh Grant had paid for. Our new home was lush. It had wood ceilings and a fan and even a name, the boathouse. We had a boat parked out in the river for our use. My son and I feared the isolation a bit. There was no one for miles and miles, but there were swans, and Arthur sat each day and fed them. We both felt taken care of, but it was a fool's paradise. These type of men don't take care of women and children. They marry their own kind, and their own kind just treat them as cash cows, and they accept this because they can't love either. I was scared. It was such a dark part of the countryside and we had no neighbours, yet they had been so nice to us. We felt safe. Arthur loved it because it was a long way to school and he felt excited about the boat and the animals. It was only at night times that darkness fell and it scared us both. We brought birds and watched the red kites who would swoop in the trees opposite. The remote country house was the best home we'd ever had. I was so grateful for Graham Johnson, Hugh Grant and Max Mosley for saving us from the streets and from unemployment. 3 weeks after we moved in, we were leaving for the school run at 6:30 and I couldn't shut the front door. A manhole in the garden had been moved, so I slipped down it and scratched all my legs so it was bloody. It was a distraction. The door wouldn't shut properly. Later that night, I searched for my laptop. It was gone. I looked and I found my other computers all missing. One computer belonged to my ex and it was gone. All my cameras were missing. Graham told me to buy a new laptop with money he gave me and that had gone too. A MacBook Pro. I dialed 999. The CID showed me how the thieves have got in. The door had been professionally broken into. They took a few bits of gold. They took none of my few bits of gold from my days of working, even though they were laid out right near the cameras. They could have just picked them up. All they wanted was the computers and cameras. I rang Graham Johnson, who joked, "Hey, look at you and your son were beat up. Just think about that. Move on. It was only scallies. Just move on. Move on. I move on. You're just one of those mad people who think you're targeted, aren't you? Now you think you've been burgled like those targeted nuts you see on YouTube." The police have just been here and they've dusted for fingerprints and every bit of computerware in the house is missing. It's not thinking you're targeted when things have been stolen and the house lock on the house has been jimmied. My little boy couldn't sleep that night. He was so shit scared of Graham bursting into his bedroom at midnight. I slept with a weapon under my pillow and I was prepared to fight if they came in again. I knew money could pay for men to do this and that, as they even warned me. Brian Harvey, formerly of E17, had dealings with Hattoff and wasn't happy. He came on my radio show telling how he was targeted by Greg Miskew. I'd already been threatened that I would have kilos of cocaine planted on me by bent cops and arrested if I didn't go along with them. I was living in fear of them, as was my son. I'd come across an influential hive and the Hollywood bees were out in full force. Sir Elton, John, Liz Hurley, Heather Mills and others like Lillian were queuing up to say I'd accessed their private data at the Priory, even though the owner said it was impossible. Jerry Hallowell said I spied on her as she had her baby Bluebell in the Portland. Sorry, Jerry, but that's impossible. Graham Johnson boasted to me, "You were the Daily Mail's sole investigator for decades. Probable cause. On times when celebrities were spied on, it must have been you. So they're going to prosecute you. Even if you didn't do it, they can come for you and finish you off. You've got no money, but they can put a charge by your name, so you'll be forever in debt to them, forever known as a thief. Unless you help me destroy Paul Dacre of the Daily Mail." I'd record him saying this to me in a French restaurant. "According to them, I spied on the great and the golden. I'd be lucky if I got a job waiting tables. So, what is going on? I ask again, who are the bloodsuckers of the planet? They have long taken over the media, banking, education, Hollywood, and all seek to keep us enclosed like animals on a farm and feed off of us. We are mere sheep, herded this way and that. Lead a quiet life and you can have your white picket fence. But you are just a slave. Culture bombing us now with millions of others of differing cultures, so our pure bloodlines are wiped out. Their pure bloodlines are wiped out too. Forced to leave their countries, served up PTSD where the elite have gone in and created wars. This is the New World Order agenda. None of us should have countries that are homes. That would make us strong, less animal. They want us animal. It's easier to herd, to control. They need to make a lower frequency of pain here to make it cold enough for Satan to be birthed in physical form and then launch an attack for full power on the Creator God. Not their Father, ours. We are at war. Thank you for listening.